Victoria Hale had always been the kind of woman who walked through life with fierce purpose, the kind of woman who didn't pause, didn't hesitate, didn't fear anything that could be solved with strategy, spreadsheets, or money. People said she was unstoppable, a force of nature wrapped in elegance, discipline, and ambition. She was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the city, the kind of company people only dreamed of working for. Her employees called her the Iron Lady, not because she was cold, but because she never bent. She held herself together even when others fell apart. She was the kind of leader who arrived first, left last, and made every decision with the certainty of someone who had clawed her way up from nothing. But nothing, no amount of power, no amount of wealth, prepared her for the day her doctor looked at her with sorrow sitting heavy behind his glasses. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the month of November dripping with gray light. Victoria sat across from him, her tablet still buzzing with notifications from executives who thought their contracts were the center of the universe. She didn't put the device down until the doctor said her name twice. "Victoria, we found a malignant mass." She felt her spine straighten, her breath pause, her heartbeat stutter. Words like advanced, untreatable, and terminal looped through the room like slow-moving thunder. She tried to breathe, but the air suddenly felt too thin. Life felt too loud, and then came the sentence that cracked open her entire world: "You have 3 months. At best, 3 months, 90 days, a season," the amount of time she usually needed just to complete a merger. The amount of time she spent drafting strategic plans. The amount of time she never thought could become the remaining sum of her life. Her first reaction was denial. She tucked the diagnosis into the back of her mind like a document she didn't have time to review. She returned to her office and worked until midnight, drowning herself in numbers, meetings, decisions, anything that kept her from thinking. But late that night, when she was finally alone in the corner of her dim office, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She cried. Not the quiet, elegant tears she allowed herself once in a decade, but the raw, unstoppable sobbing of someone who realized she was losing everything she built, everything she dreamed of, everything she might still be. She didn't tell her employees. She didn't tell her board. She didn't tell her family, because she didn't have one. She had spent so much of her life building an empire that she forgot to build a home. She had friends, yes, but none close enough for this. She had thousands of people who admired her, respected her, feared her, but none who knew her heart. She felt alone in a way she hadn't since childhood, and in that loneliness, she made a decision she never expected. She left work early the next day. She didn't know where she was going. She just drove, past the skyscrapers, past the busy streets, past the noise of her own collapsing world. She drove until the city faded behind her and a quiet lakeside park appeared in its place. It was a small place, simple, peaceful, almost too ordinary for someone like her. But grief makes even the powerful seek silence. She parked her car and walked toward the edge of the lake, where the wind brushed the water in soft ripples. She sat on a bench, arms wrapped around herself, staring forward without really seeing anything. She didn't know that just 20 feet away, a man sat cross-legged on a blanket with a little boy climbing over his lap. The boy was laughing, pure, unfiltered joy, while blowing into a broken plastic whistle. That sound, sharp and silly and utterly innocent, cut through her heavy thoughts. She turned slightly and saw the boy trying to make a tune while the man beside him watched with amused patience. The man looked up, his eyes warm, his expression curious. He gave her a soft nod, the kind people give when they sense someone is hurting. His kindness startled her. Strangers rarely approached her. Her presence usually intimidated people. But this man, this single dad sitting under a tree with his cheerful child, looked at her like she wasn't a CEO. Like she wasn't dying. Like she was simply a person sitting alone on a cold day. He said, "You look like you've had a tough day." She almost laughed. Tough didn't come close to describing it, but something about his voice invited honesty. She didn't give details. She only said she had a lot on her mind. He didn't pry. Instead, he offered her half of the sandwich he had packed for himself. She was so shocked she actually hesitated. No one had offered her something so simple, so genuine, so human, in years. His name was Daniel. He was a mechanic, a widower, and the little boy climbing all over him was Noah, his entire world. Victoria found herself listening to their story even though she had arrived wanting to avoid everyone. She learned how Daniel lost his wife to an accident 2 years earlier. How he had to rebuild his life from the ashes of grief. How he worked long hours just to provide stability for his son. How he learned to cook, braid hair, fix anything that broke, and heal wounds invisible to everyone but him and Noah. There was something extraordinary about the way he spoke, steadfast, gentle, unpretentious. He told her how he used to think he wouldn't survive the pain of losing the love of his life. But he did, not because he was strong, but because he had a tiny boy depending on him. Pain becomes lighter when it's shared, he said softly. Something inside her cracked open. She left the park feeling different. Not better, but less suffocated. So she returned the next day. And the next. And the next. She hadn't planned to make it a routine. But grief has its own strange gravity. It pulls you toward the things that hold you without asking questions. Daniel and Noah became that for her. They didn't know her title. They didn't know her wealth. They didn't know she was dying. They just welcomed her into their simple, warm world without expecting anything in return. She learned how to skip stones across the lake. She learned how to grill food over a tiny portable stove, how to build a toy boat out of scrap wood, how to laugh again, really laugh, at Noah's childish jokes. She learned the beauty of slowness, gentleness, connection. 2 weeks after their first meeting, she finally told Daniel the truth. She didn't know why she trusted him so deeply. Maybe because he had walked through his own darkness. Maybe because he understood pain in a way corporate executives never could. Maybe because she was tired of carrying the secret alone. When she told him she had 3 months left, he didn't speak at first. Tears filled his eyes, but not from fear or pity, more from compassion. He reached out and held her trembling hand, and that simple gesture broke through a wall she had built her entire life. He said, "You don't have to face the end alone. Let me be here. Let us be here." And so began the most beautiful 3 months of her life. They spent afternoons by the lake and evenings at Daniel's small home, where she found warmth she had forgotten existed. She helped Noah with homework. She learned how to make pancakes, bad ones, and Daniel teased her gently. She found herself dozing on the couch with Noah curled against her side. She felt something she never expected to feel at the end of her life. She felt like she belonged somewhere. As her illness worsened, Daniel became her constant. He drove her to appointments. He made her meals. He talked to her about her fears and dreams and regrets. He never let her feel helpless. He never let her feel alone. One night, when her body was weak and her voice barely above a whisper, Daniel took her outside to watch the stars. She cried against his chest, mourning the life she wouldn't get to finish. He held her tighter and said, "You've lived more honestly these last weeks than most people do in a lifetime." She smiled through tears. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to die. She had known success, but now she knew love. She had known victory, but now she knew peace. In her final week, she wrote letters, one for Daniel, one for Noah, and one to her board of directors. But there was one more thing she did, something she never told Daniel about. She rewrote her will, not to give him money, he would have refused it, but to fund a foundation in his name. A foundation for widowed parents, for struggling fathers, for families fighting illness and grief. She said it felt right. She said he inspired it. She said she wanted her last act in this world to be born from the love she found in her last months. The night she died, Daniel was holding her hand. She whispered, "Thank you, for giving me more life in 3 months than I felt in 30 years. Her last tear fell against his wrist as she smiled, softly, peacefully, and closed her eyes. He buried her with a single white lily from Noah, because she once told him lilies made her feel calm. When the lawyers read her will weeks later, Daniel broke down. The foundation she created bore his name, but her heart. She left him a letter, written with shaking hands but unwavering love. It said,